It's an incredible podcast full of gems. So please check it out after this. Trusting the podcast, the podcast that celebrates Black women doing big things, giving insight into their journey to where they are today in the hopes of inspiring each listener to chase their dreams and fulfill their purpose. Merging together thoughtful storytelling, and she is a storyteller, and honest conversations, Debra's interview style has been fondly described as immersive, authentic, and sincere. Through her conversations, she is able to transport both the listener and the interviewee through key moments in their journey, whilst asking questions that encourage us to pause, take inventory, and then go and become the best versions of ourselves. So guys, let's do a very good, warm CP welcome to Debra Chosen. So much. Thank you, Stella. Thank you, Susan. Thank you to the whole C&P team. Thank you to every single one of you for being here. I hope you guys are excited for this part. Are you excited for the panels? Okay. Me, I'm excited. I'm a bit biased, but my favorite part of most events is when we get to sit down and have conversations, right? It's one thing being an audience, but I think that having a panel is an opportunity for us to kind of get in each other's business in a positive sense, and realize that there's so much that we share in common, and we're all on different journeys, but actually there are certain things that unite all of us. And so today's panels will hopefully do just that for us. So again, my name is Debra Chosen, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here. So we're going to jump right into the first panel, because I know you guys are quite keen to hear from everyone. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce them, and similarly, as Stella did for me, I will do for you. I will be reading each and every person's bio, and as I'm reading them, please, I want to hear shouts, I want to hear encouragement, and these women are super, super special, and having their time with us today is something we super appreciate. So let's jump into it. So the first panel today is on excelling in the marketplace, okay? Excelling in the marketplace. We've got two juicy panels, but first we're going to dive into that conversation. And joining us, we have amazing individuals, including, first and foremost, Catharina. That's right, Catharina. So while you remain seated, I'm just going to read your bio out to you. So Catharina is an Austrian Nigerian who currently lives in the UK with her husband and beautiful children. Born and raised in the church to parents whose ministry focused on transforming the lives of victims of human and sex trafficking, as well as her own personal experiences of sexual abuse, suicide, self-harm, amongst many others. Catharina has both witnessed and encountered the power of transformation in the person of Jesus, and today seeks to live the rest of her days by letting Christ live his life through her. So please give a warm welcome to Catharina! She's okay, guys, she's okay. Great. All right, so we're going to jump into our second introduction. The next person is the wonderful Opeyemi. Now, Opeyemi is the International Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Program Manager at Meta, which some of you may know as Facebook, just that small company, Facebook, serving as the lead interface for the employee resource groups to guide their impact on programs that build a more inclusive workplace. Opeyemi is also the co-author of Twice as Hard. I'm sure many of you know the book. A book that she wrote alongside her husband, Raphael Sofoluke. Twice as Hard explores Black identity in the workplace and business and provides readers with practical advice to develop both personally and professionally. So please, give it up for Opeyemi! gives me great pleasure to introduce Stacy. A little bit about Stacy. So, Stacy is a sought-after practitioner, counselor, speaker, and mentor with over 10 years of clinical experience working with those with mental disorders, young children, and families. She also has a passion for people and understands how difficult it can be to talk about mental health issues. So please, put her hands together for Stacy! Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Hey ladies, how's everyone doing?
Not bad.
Yeah? Anyone get wrecked from the worship? Anyone still trying to gather themselves? That's nice. Yeah. Well, we're really excited to have you here today and have this conversation about excelling in the workplace. So, of course, as I said before, the conversation is all about excelling in the workplace. But I think that before we even think about where we are today, our corporate roles and our businesses that we have, it's really great to kind of go backwards and look into where we once began. So childhood is one of my favorite topics to talk about. So if you can think way back, growing up, what did you want to be? And in what ways do you feel that differs to what you're doing today? You want to go, Stacey?
So interesting. Okay, so when I was younger, I always wanted to be a barrister because I was quite a chatterbox in my house. I was always advocating for my rights because I am the only girl amongst a bunch of boys. So I was like, yeah, barrister it's going to be. Fast forward, I ended up working at the Crown Prosecution Service for some time. And to be honest, I used to cry with the witnesses when they give their statements. My heart was always behind the witness stand, and I was just like, this is not where I'm supposed to be, and that's how I ended up making the switch into the mental health industry to support those who required support in their hardest times.
Amazing. And to yourself, Opeyemi, what did you want to be when you were younger?
So I remember when I was younger, I always wanted to be a paediatrician. I was very specific. I said I wanted to work in the medical field and watch Casualty on a Saturday night. And I think it's mainly because I had a heart for people. So I've always had this desire to help people in some form or some capacity. Then I remember getting to GCSEs and I just thought, science is just not for me. So we're going to have to figure something out here. So fast forward into uni, I didn't actually know what kind of industry I would go into, but I ended up in investment banking, in equities, did not enjoy it, but then found this CSR space, corporate social responsibility, where within the professional services space, I was able to give back, to help people, and I thought, isn't God interesting? Like he plants these seeds in your heart where you just have this desire to help people. I first thought it would be in medicine, clearly not, and so I found my way into CSR and then eventually into diversity and inclusion. So, yes, where I am today.
Amazing. And Catharina, what's your...
I don't actually remember what I wanted to be, but I think my parents inspired me from a very young age. They just lived their life in Christ and were very involved in ministry and helping just people that have been through sex trade or whatever, just find their way back to Christ. That's always inspired me. My dad used to work for the United Nations, so I thought I would follow his footsteps in international relations and law. When I came to the UK, I realized it's not what I thought it was, and I am where I am today. But I think just a heart for people and helping people transition into life and be whatever God wants them to be has always been that.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And the reason why I asked that question, I think it's so interesting when you think about what you wanted to be, or maybe what the inspirations that surrounded you and what you're doing today. Sometimes it doesn't look exactly like what you imagined, but the core oftentimes still is there, right? And it shows that God has a way of using anything ultimately, right? That your gift and your passions, they ultimately are so much at your core, but the way in which you express that, it's colourful and it changes and it transforms. And we're going to look at how your journeys have transformed as well in some of these questions. So one of my favourite things about God is that God is a holistic God, right? He's a God that cares about all sides of us, all elements. He's not just about your spirituality, but he's also about your health. He's about your relationships. He's about all of us. Right, so when we think about the area of excelling in the marketplace and our careers, I'd love to know what role has your relationship with God played in the way in which your career journey has panned out, and how do you dream with God when it comes to your passions and your business ideas?
I'm happy to make that.
Sure, okay.
When I think about my career, when I initially started, like I said, I didn't really know where I was supposed to be. I knew that I wanted to be in an industry that would support the lifestyle that I believed God's designed for me, which is a good one. And so I was quite intentional when I was at uni to kind of get into a place that would enable me to have the resources to have that kind of lifestyle. But at the same time, I said, on my day-to-day, I want to be able to feel like I'm doing something of worth, importance. And so I would say the first few years of my career were really, really challenging because I was in this space where I was like learning about things that I genuinely wasn't that interested in. And like I was under a lot of pressure working with traders day in, day out. And like there was just a lot of demands on me. And I remember just saying to God, like, I'm just not enjoying this. I'm not happy. But then there's a part of me, everyone around me was like, I've been doing so well, this is great ops. And I'm like, oh man, this is tough. And it got to this stage in my life where I think I was depressed. Like, anytime I would see Canary Wharf, like on the weekend, I didn't even want to look in that time. Like, it was literally physically. I would be like, my church was in Greenwich, and I remember at the time I could see Canary Wharf where I was come from, where I was parking my car, and I'd like walk down. I'm not looking at anything related to work on the weekends. It was so much so that on a Friday, I was like, praise God, tomorrow's Saturday. And then on a Sunday, I was like, oh man. And then I just said, God, I know that you have a purpose for me here, and I just need you to take me to that place. And I remember there was this one year where I was preparing for the new year, and I was asking God for direction. And there was this sermon that I kept listening to by Michael Youssef. And I listened to it like every single day. And it was about when Paul and Silas were in prison and they just praised God, like in their state. For me at that time, my career almost felt like a prison because I didn't feel like I could breathe right at that moment. And they just praised God. And I found that in my journey, in my career, like God always has a plan and a purpose. So even when there are times where it's challenging, praise Him and continue to trust Him, that this is part of your journey, that you're gonna grow on this journey. And now when I look back, I am forever grateful for the tough times I've had at work because they've really molded me to be very resilient in the workplace. And there are a lot of challenges that will still come in like your careers, but because of some of the hardships you've faced or experienced, it's almost like more of the duck's back, like it's all right, I can handle it because I've handled a lot worse. And so I think I've learned in my career just to praise God regardless of the situation I'm facing.
That's good. And Stacey?
I'm just like, I'm just engrossed in her story. I think for me, I had a lot of challenges in early adulthood. So I wasn't born in this country, born in Jamaica, came over here as a young person, and I struggled with a sense of belonging. I didn't quite belong here with my peers, being the only black girl in my class. But whenever I went back home to Jamaica, I never really belonged there either because they'll look at me like, you're the British girl. So flipping back and forth between the UK and Jamaica, I was really struggling, and that played a huge part on my mental health, not having a sense of belonging, not knowing who I was. And I remember one night I was just crying out to God, and He literally met me in my humanity. In my brokenness, He came and let me know that I belonged to Him. Even though I struggled in my mind, even though I was struggling in my body, not wondering who I was, He let me know I am, that I am. And the story that just came to mind was when Jesus was healing the blind man in Bethsaida. He took him out of the village, out from among what he was familiar with, who he was comfortable with, and He touched him. And the first time He touched him, and he opened his eyes, he said he could see man like trees. He still wasn't seeing very clearly. But the second time He touched him, he could see more clearly. And I think for me, that was my process. I feel like the first time God led me and was, leading me, I couldn't quite see clearly. Until I got a bit older, He touched me again, and I knew, okay, where He met me in my humanity is what He wants me to minister to. And that's how I've always merged mental health and faith in all that I do.
I find it interesting that it's the way that God met you that inspired the way that you meet others as well. That's so powerful. Catharina as well.
So for me, I think my journey has been an interesting one. Just over 10 years ago, I was not 10 actually, I'm 37, I was 15 years ago. Okay, so about 15 years ago, I remember I was in a place of prayer and I was saying, I want to know you as Jehovah. You know, we say Jehovah Jireh, Jehovah Nissi, Jehovah Shammah, you call him all these Hebrew names, and I remember the Holy Spirit stopped me and said, what are you saying? And I said, well, I want to know you as provider. And he said, you do realize that if you're placing a demand on my provision power, you'll have to go through the season of lack. And so I went through all of that. So I had about 2.5 years of...
Everyone's like, that's not what I signed up for.
And that's what happened. I went through a season of being out of work for 2.5 years. But I love the season of what you were saying when you were preaching. You were saying obedience is a gateway through the promise. And I remember those 2.5 years, God was giving me crazy instructions. No, I'm saying crazy, like Tottenham Park Road, run up and down the platform and just praise me. In the middle of office hours closed, 5 o'clock, Liverpool Street, kneel down and lay me an altar. And just crazy kind of instructions that you obey with tears in your eyes. But I remember 2.5 years later, and we got married, and it's such a testimony. We don't have enough time, but God came through for us in those 2.5 years. We got married, we did a lot of things. But in terms of my career, I remember I was out of work for 2.5 years, and I was given a job 2 days before I got married. When I got married and then finally started the job, I was in the job and my confidence had broken because I'd been out of work for 2.5 years. I didn't know what I was meant to do. I'd lost all my confidence, and I remember they were giving me a deliverable. And I tried to do this by myself for 2 weeks or a week or whatever, and I couldn't do it. And I went to the toilet upstairs on the 12th floor, and I cried, and I said, God, how do you bring me here and embarrass me in front of everybody? And then I went out of the toilet, and God said, look out of the window. And I looked out of the window, and the very bus stop where I had knelt down was right in front of the office building. And I said to God, I dedicate my life at work to you. And since then, what I really understand is God is not random. He doesn't call you to the miracle, he calls you to the people that can miracle. Because it's ultimately about glorifying himself through his children. And so in the marketplace, I've realized that it's not about me being a director, a business consultant, a specialist, whatever. It is me being Christ in the marketplace. And so what it means in terms of my day-to-day, I am whoever he wants me to be, and I do whatever he wants me to do. And I think just that understanding to me has helped me, because when I came out of that place, the thing that took me a week to try and figure out, within an hour, the Holy Spirit took over my hands, and I was telling Michelle the other day, so in an hour and a half, I produced something that I was trying to do by myself for 2 weeks. And God said, if you trust me, I will be through you who you want me to be.
And you know what's so powerful about what you all said, really, is that you can see that his presence is what makes the difference, right? It's like doing things in the physical, just seeing as I'm physically here at Canary Wharf, I'm in this job, but actually going deeper and asking God, why am I here? What is it? Why did you take me through what I've been through? Why have I gone through these challenges? And understanding that there's a purpose attached to every position that we're in. So thank you so much for sharing that. I want to take a moment and actually speak to the women in the room who may be feeling stuck right now, okay? Because here we are, the theme is on the move, right? And we're feeling very much like, yeah, when I leave here, I'm going to do this, I'm going to launch that, I'm going to post the post, I'm going to launch the podcast, whatever it might be. But I know that there's definitely a few people in the room, myself included here, when we get home and we sit with ourselves, sometimes we can find reasons, excuses, insecurities, negative thoughts that hold us back and keep us stuck, right? And so I'm interested to know, on your journeys, as you've encountered, I'm sure in some stage, these fears or these doubts, what is it that's enabled you to push past yourself and get out of your own way to really fulfill God's purpose through your careers?
Yeah, I think for me, like Susan shared this morning, it's bigger than you. It's always bigger than you. Always. The people that we come into contact with, whether that's at work, some of us, we have children, legacy, generation, it's bigger than you. And I think that's what the enemy tries to deceive you, to make you feel like it's all about you. And when you start to look inwards, you forget the challenges and the people that need Christ outward. And so for me, every time I decide to go into myself, woe is me. God always, what about your neighbor? What about your neighbor? What about your neighbor? And that then pushes me to walk in compassion, to walk in love, and give over my worries to God, and then do what he needs me to do in the earth. And I realized, as Susan says, the more you pour, the more I pour into people, even when I don't want to show up with clients, even when I don't want to sit with them in their mess, the more I pour is the more God pours into me. And then everything that I need is provided for. So for me, it's all about service, it's all about pouring, it's all about looking outward and never inward.
And I think, and I'll just continue from what you just said, and I think we naturally live in a culture, in a season, whatever, where we think we're Christians and we're trying to live life with Christ. And so I have a plan and I'm making him part of my plan. And I realize what God is teaching me is that no, like, he's not part of my plan, I get to be part of his plan. And that's a mindset shift. Because that one takes the responsibility off of you to deliver. It is a privilege for us to be part of whatever it is that God is doing on the earth. And the fact that he places a demand on us to say, actually, yes, I want you to do that, because I have need of you for that, is a privilege. And I think so recently in the place of prayer, God speaks to me in visions, and in that vision, it was Jesus Christ standing, and let's say everybody here in the crowd, and then everybody had a name tag. So I would have my name tag, you would have your name tag, and he would have his name tag, right? And then there's an altar call, and who wants to give the life to Jesus, who wants to whatever. And so everybody walks up to Jesus and takes his name card. Obviously, he's got unending amounts of his card, right? So everybody ends up with Catharina and Jesus, you and Jesus, and Stacy and Jesus, right? And then he said, look around, what's the issue here? And he said, everybody has 2 name tags. Nobody handed over their name tag to him. Do you see the picture? So we live life with Catharina and Jesus, Stacy and Jesus. He's saying, actually, no, you receive my life, but you give me yours. And until we learn to give him ours, so that he can live his life through me, there will always be the dichotomy. Yes, I have a plan, yes, I have a goal, yes, I want to lead, but actually, no, he has a plan, he has a purpose, he has an assignment, and he needs to accomplish that through me. The question is, am I available for him to take over me, to do his will? And the moment we realize that here, it's a life of obedience. We don't need to know it all. I don't need to be the master in the room. I don't even need to know anything in the room. As long as I'm plugged to the source, it will happen. And so it's less relying on me and what I know, and relying on who he is and what he wants to do.
That's powerful. That's powerful. Yeah, that's we can clap right there. We can clap right there. Yeah. It's the perspective shift, isn't it? It's from how to who. Like who, knowing who you serve, knowing who God is, knowing that he is all powerful, and that it's through him that all of these things can be accomplished. So I think that's really incredible. Opeyemi, over to you.
Yeah, no, following on from that, I think one of the things that I have found is a lot of the times we question ourselves, we question our ability, especially as black women. And the reality is we're in often majority white environments. And I remember just always even still sometimes recently, I have to remind myself that you have what it takes, not because you are great, but because greatness is within you. And that's what I had to learn in the workplace. Even if I don't have the answer, God has the answer. Even if I don't know what step to take, God can position me in a place where people will help me. And that is what I realized. Do not depend on yourself. Because when you depend on yourself, you will fail. It's as simple as that. But when you lean into God, when you surrender, to surrender is to become vulnerable. To surrender is to recognize I am just a vessel. It's not about me. It's about who's operating within me. And so Susan mentioned earlier about the season of doubting yourself. And there are so many times I've gone through that kind of season. And I've had to remind myself that you must silence the voice of the enemy. Because especially as black women in this industry, the devil had it his way. We'll be the low of the lows. But greater is he that is in you than he that is in this world. And so when I've got to a stage in my career where even if I don't know, I'm going to walk. Because God is going to show me. And so I think what I found in my career and just in general, even with this book, and I brought this book today that I wrote with my husband is to give away to anyone who needs it in their career. It's called, okay, you can have it. And what I found is when you lean on God, there are things that you don't even think you're capable of doing. You wouldn't even imagine doing it. It's like, it doesn't even cross your mind. Like, me writing a book, I'm like, I don't even love writing essays like that. But when you lean on God, then there's that reminder that it's not about me. Just make yourself available. Just say yes, and He'll do all the work. And so what I found, like, in my career, and I continue to find today, is greater is He that is in you. So when the enemy comes to whisper, like, you're not good enough, you're going to realize you're not that great, you don't even know what you're talking about, then you just say it. Be quiet. Be quiet. Because I know the God I serve. And that's what you always have to remember. And because the God you serve loves you, He has a plan for you. He is going to prosper you. God will give you every single resource that you need to deliver and be excellent where He has placed you. Excellence is your portion. And that's what God has always reminded me. Something I've known, even if I'm not the best academically or whatever it is, excellence and nothing less is my portion. Can everyone say that? Excellence and nothing less is my portion. Excellence and nothing less is my portion. So wherever God has positioned you, you must remember, because He has placed me here, He will give me what it takes, what I need to shine. And let me tell you what happens. When you shine, it's not for you. The Bible says, let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify who? Your Father in heaven. So you find ways to talk about Jesus when you're shining. Wherever He has positioned and placed you. So those unbelievers around you, they're going to say, what is it about Stella? She just came to this organization, but she's doing such great work. Stella, what's the secret? Do you understand? Jesus is the secret. Thank you. So there you go. Jesus is the secret.
I have one final question for you, and it's interesting because we began to talk about focusing on Jesus and taking the eyes off yourself and making it about Him. And I think that for some of us, especially in this generation where if you didn't post it, it didn't happen. If you don't publish it, if you don't write a blog about it or whatever, then it didn't happen. I think that we've become hypersensitive about being visible. And we often negate how important the behind the scenes work can be, right? And some of us feel like what I do is not important because it's not on a platform, right? So maybe I'm the one that does the tech behind the scenes, I'm not the one on the stage, so am I important? How have you navigated if you felt this, the pressure to perform and to be visible, and how do you ensure that you still walk knowing your purpose without, whether you have people clapping or not, whether there is an applause or not, how do you basically lean into just doing the work and not worrying about being visible necessarily?
That's a challenging question, and I think, well, it's a good question, it makes you really think. I think for me the difference is, I'm a mother of two, so my platform in life is completely different. The eyes that are watching me is never about social media. There's eyes in my house that are watching me, and that's my ministry. My ministry is first to my kids, it's to my family, it's to my neighbours, it's those who are seeing me live out. My life is meant to be an epistle read of men. I'm not really bothered if social media doesn't see it, but my neighbour who needs some food, it matters. The person that is struggling about their rent or struggling about bills and don't know how they're going to find it, that's who matters to me. So I think I've come to a stage where I've met so many people in their humanity working within the mental health sector. I see for them what is breaking them, and what's breaking them isn't always social media. It's the reality, it's world, it's having to confront what's happening around them. So for me, that's how I've gotten lost in others, I've gotten lost in neighbours, I get lost in my actual world that I walk in, day out, because that's how I need to sleep at night. No offence to anybody that follows me on social media, we do love you, but there is a life that I live, and that is what I'm going to have to give an account for at the end of the day.
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, it's like my social media is up and down. Sometimes I have to post because of like some of the stuff, but I haven't posted for a long time. But I recognize that like when it comes to work and performance, it's onto God that you're working. And I think that kind of helps you, like sometimes people see the post, but they don't see the process. And so if you post, sometimes it's for other people actually, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes it's to show people that this is possible, you know, there's great things happening. So there's good thing, like social media is good in some ways, but you mustn't allow yourself to get consumed by just like the end product, because there's a process. And like ultimately, I think what helps you is recognizing that, just like make God part of that process. And yeah, I think that's for me the way that I follow. I'm not really out there. I wouldn't say very much. You know, realize that for me.
No, I love that you said that, and both of you were able to share that, because I always say it matters most how your life feels, not how it looks. And sometimes we can become so occupied with, you know, what filter I put on this. How's my life looking according to the feed? How is your real life, right? How is your life? Invest your time and your energy into that, because that's the real fruit. So thank you for sharing that. We're going to actually move into the Q&As at this point. And we've got the lovely Stella helping us as well. So this is an opportunity for those of us in the audience to ask questions directly to our wonderful panel. If there's anything on your mind or any question that you have that you'd love to share here today, don't be shy.
Okay, hi, thank you guys so much for all that you shared. Just a question that came to mind, just in case someone might need it. I know, Deborah, you asked the question around, you know, people who might feel stuck, in terms of, yes, you know there's more that you want to do, want to achieve. You have a rough idea of the last thing God said to you, but in terms of when you've been in that space before, what practical steps, like if you had to give 2 top practical tips to people to move out of, you know, I'm stuck and I have no idea what to do next. What has helped you move out of that space in previous times?
Great question. And to either anyone on the panel.
Yeah, really quickly, something that me and Susan shared. Firstly, what is in your hand? About the passage that we looked at earlier. When I felt stuck, it's again looking at like, what do I actually enjoy doing? What brings me joy? So what do I have here? And again, that might be something I do outside of work. It could be inside of work. Sometimes our day job is not going to be the thing that brings us the most joy, but there's a passion project or something outside of work that God has placed in our hands, and we can really kind of sow into that. And sometimes it may be at work. And then the other question, the other thing I say to myself is, do I need to move on from this place? Because again, if things are not working for you, you are not a tree. Pick yourself up and pick your leg and go. You can move. And then something that we actually spoke about in the book is like sometimes you have to move on to move up. And so if you're in a situation where you feel stuck, you're not getting a promotion, you're not getting a recognition, you know that you're delivering, you know that you're adding value, but for whatever reason, it's just not working the way you feel it should. Ask God, you know, God, is it time for me to move on? Have I taken everything I can take from here and I can go and give elsewhere? Then, so those are some of the practical things I'll say. Look at what you've got, what you're passionate about. How can you kind of utilize that to create something you enjoy doing? And then, is it time to move on?
I think for me is to take a holistic view of what being stuck means. So sometimes if you're looking physically, what is actually weighing me down? It could be something like, I don't know, your weight maybe, right? Mentally, what is keeping me shackled? Could it be an emotion? Why is it that I'm feeling like I cannot move? What is it that is either weighing me down, holding me back, making me feel stuck? Start to evaluate yourself, and I feel like sometimes when you start to make shifts in the physical or even in the spiritual, things start to move. So for me, sometimes when I feel stuck, I literally have to start moving things around in my flat, in my space. Things need to be decluttered. I need to get rid of some things. And sometimes it's in the movement that then God starts to minister to me about, okay, what do I do next, right? And I think it's when you're just sitting there, stagnant, God is like, okay, you're just gonna sit there? I'm over here, I'm move. And again, it's also trust. You have to trust the process, you have to trust yourself, and you have to trust the God that you serve, that He's got you at the next step. So for me, looking at yourself holistically, spiritually, physically, mentally, and looking at what could possibly be shackling you.
Okay, next question.
Hi ladies. So my question is about balance. So all of you are mothers and businesswomen. How do you achieve balance?
Does balance exist? Let's start that. Great question.
I was going to say that because I think there is what we think balance should look like, but like I see it as when I think of God, God is Father, God is Son, God is Word, God is Peace, God is Strength, God is whatever, and depending on your need, if you're in need of strength, He'll be strength to you in that moment, right? And so for me, I'm like that. I'm multifaceted. I'm Catharina mom, Catharina wife, Catharina da, right? And so depending on what I am facing in this very moment, that is the expression of me that you will see. And so I never think it's going to be a 20, 30, 40% split. I think when my children are in the room, then I'll be a mother to them in the room, and I meet their need. Like whatever demand they place on me is what I respond to. And so that takes the pressure off of me to be everything to all men at all times, because that's impossible. But I can be the version of me that is required, just like Christ is, I think. You know, in this room right now, He might be your provider, my healer, your strength, right? And so I think if that's the perspective, then honestly, I just take the pressure off of me to be, whatever you need me to be, I will be in the greatest capacity that I can. But that's what it is. But I do think there's an element of intentionality, yes, where you feel like your husband is deprived of something, be sensitive enough, be discerning, and don't come against me. But I think there's an element of me understanding that in this moment, the version of me that is required is X, Y, Z, and that's what I will do wholeheartedly in that moment.
I really like that answer, actually. It's really good. It just reminded me two things. So balance for me is being present. I'm somebody who's always asking people, are you present? Is life just happening to you, or are you actually engaging in your own life? So for me, balance is also being present. And then also recognizing that not all priorities weigh the same. And sometimes we think about balance, we think about equal weight. But the weight of my family in comparison to maybe the weight of a career, my family will always outweigh it. So that will prioritize how much time I give to it, because at the end of the day, when I'm old and grey, and my kids turn around and tell me, you were too busy because of your career, was that balance? It wasn't, right? So again, it just depends on what you prioritize and what you give weight to, and then that is how you, for me personally, I find my balance. So if it's the kids today, that's it, it's the kids. If it's the career tomorrow, the kids are at school, however that may look like, I divide my time according to my priorities.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one for me. I personally don't believe balance can be achieved. What I believe in is juggling. That's just always been, because I think balance assumes some kind of equilibrium, and like that doesn't happen for me. And I'll be honest, I've been really bad, like at just achieving. I'll work till crazy hours, and then so I'll sort out my kids, and then there's work, and then time with my husband. But both of us are we've got a lot going on, and so we have both got to a place where we're like, we need to be better. We need to set boundaries. And so what I've always believed in is juggling, and it's kind of similar to what you said in a way. Like, we are multiple things there are different times you have to show up in different ways. And so there are times where I'm juggling, so I've got this ball in my hand and I'm focused on being a mother to my kids in that moment. They've gone to nursery school, I throw that ball up in the air, I'm at work now and I'm holding on to my work ball. Then I'm thinking, oh, it's getting to like 4 o'clock, let me start thinking about dinner. I throw my work ball quickly in there, pick up my work ball, let me start getting things ready in the home. And so it's constantly a juggle. And do you know what? I feel like when you've got Christ, there are a number of balls you can juggle at one time without dropping the ball. But sometimes you may take your eyes off a certain when it drops. And you're like, oh man, but that's because we're human. And so it's about learning. This is my lesson right now. My keyword recently, my sister was talking boundaries. Boundaries. I've been working on setting boundaries. I got invited to a call this week at 8 p.m. I said, you're in San Fran, I'm in London. No thanks, I'm not joining. It's 8 p.m. And that's me setting boundaries. There's a time that I would get on an 8 p.m. call. I'll get on an 11 p.m. call. I'll do a 7 a.m. call. But no, I'm setting boundaries. So what I've learned when it comes to balance is about being, someone said intentional, being intentional. And again, in all of this, we still got to fit in God. So you need to, so there was a quote I remember saying that if you are too busy to pray, you are too busy, you're busier than what God wants you to be. So then sometimes I've been in that season, guys, I'll be honest. And I'm like, God, do you know what, you need to take certain things off my plate. And he's like, babe, you're putting it on your plate. So I'm learning to set boundaries. I'm learning to be intentional. And I'm working on my boundaries.
I think we've got time for one more question. I know someone had their hands up here. Yes, just there, in the middle.
The through line throughout this week of morning prayers has been how you don't have to do it alone, and how Esther had Mordecai, but she had the Avogiyadem and Amanda with her.
Not the
So can you speak on examples in your life when you, in the mundane or in the mountaintop moments, you've actually relied on those that you feel like you can trust around you, and how that looked like?
One of my support systems in the room, so Mandy is my sister friend for over a decade. And for me, to be able to have iron sharpen iron is really important. To have people who actually have the capacity to cover you in times when you need is really important. So for me, community is big. I have a very core set of friends that I've journeyed with through life. And I think being purposeful and intentional about who you have around you and just observing, okay, if I give this person a part of me, test them. Can they cover me? Are they committed to my own well-being? And even look how they live out their own life. Because sometimes our friendships are imbalanced, and I don't know if you check if your friends are always coming to you but you can't go to them. I think that's something strong there, but I think that's a conversation. But Mandy can call me and I can call Mandy, and I think that's really important for you to just observe in your life. Who can you call? Who can you pray with? I can sit and worship with Mandy, I can sit and pray, Bible studies, then we can go out and slay at the same time. We can do it all. I think that's important. And yeah, we journey together. So for me, taking a risk, maybe for some of you it might be a risk to be vulnerable. Take the risk. It's worth it in the end. Whether you learn about that person or you learn about yourself, the risk is worth the friendship.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's also important. I lean on my family a lot. My sister knows. They're massive support system, and I thank God for that. And not everybody has that, but I think it's important to not be afraid to ask for help when you need it. And I'm that kind of person. Depending on what it is, most of the times I'll try and get on with it. But it's okay to be like, I need a hand. And I think as a child of God, you'll recognize that even God said it is not good for man to be alone. So he made sure that Adam had a companion. And I believe that God will put people in your life to support you. And so again, you have to look around, and if there are people that actually I can ask them for help. Sometimes it's uncomfortable for you because you may just not be that kind of person to ask for help. But just, every once in a while if you need it, ask for help, and you'll be glad that you did. And so that's what I would say, don't be afraid to ask for help and look around, who can you trust, who can you depend on, and then be there for those people, or ask those people to be there for you in the same way you would be there for them as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think for me, my support system is here actually, so over there. But I think the reason why I appreciate that friendship is because, and this is not trying to be, like everyone's special, but my kind of person,
God asks me and gets me to do really, really crazy things, and things where I have felt embarrassed, or like, it doesn't take all of that, like, come on, everybody's minding their business, why am I kneeling on the street being like a mad woman? But what I love is the fact that in that craziness, people that are not embarrassed about me, people that I don't need to look a particular way, like in all my craziness, they love my crazy. Because it's not just about being crazy, it's by an instruction. When God tells you to do something crazy, not having people be like, oh, I don't want to have anything to do with that, but actually people like that, they are with me in that moment. I think that's so, so critical. But ultimately, honestly, and without wanting to sound too spiritual, the greatest person to make you feel loved is Christ, honestly. Like, your friends are an expression of that, but when you get to a place where you need that, He's the one that ultimately feels it. And He will confirm it through the people around you. But don't let that be your source. Let Christ be your source. And let him how do you call it? What's the English word? Let Him confirm that through the people around you. But don't put the pressure on the people around you to feel like I'm the only Christ can feel.
I think let's get hands together right there. Thank you so much. That now concludes our Q&A, but thank you so much, Catharina, Opeyemi, Stacy. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for sharing.